The wind howled across the Colorado Rockies as the helicopter began to descend. From above, Margaret saw something that made her stomach turn. Dozens of large concrete slabs arranged in perfect rows across a secluded valley. From the sky, it looked like a modern-day cemetery, silent, clinical, and lifeless. "I promised I'd never come here," she whispered, gripping her scarf as the wind whipped through her silver hair. She had been married to David for 20 years, and it had only been 3 days since she became a widow. But now, she was breaking the one promise she made to him. Back in 2003, on their wedding day, David had held her hands and said, "There's just one thing I'll ever ask of you. Never go to the old property in the mountains. It's dangerous. Just trust me." And Margaret, in love and without reason to doubt him, had promised. For 2 decades, she never asked about it. David went there once a month, always saying it was for some old family investments. Margaret would kiss him goodbye and watch him drive off. They lived a quiet life in Denver. He ran a small architecture firm. She led a senior reading group at the public library. Weekends at the farmer's market. Summers in Cape Cod. Laughter, routines, quiet love, and one locked door in his past. That door swung wide open the day David didn't come home. He collapsed during his morning walk. A sudden cardiac arrest. The doctor said it was instant. Margaret was still numb with grief when 3 days later she found a strange leather-bound notebook tucked between David's architecture portfolios. Inside were names, dates, GPS coordinates, and cryptic phrases. On the final page he'd written, "If anything happens to me, Margaret needs to know the truth." She sat frozen for several minutes, staring at the words. Her heart raced. She opened the miniature model of the Brooklyn Bridge David kept on his bookshelf. A secret compartment clicked open. Inside was a flash drive. She plugged it into his laptop. There was only one video file. David appeared on the screen, older, tired, but clear-eyed. "My love, if you're seeing this, something's happened to me. I'm sorry, but now you have to go to the property. You need to see it. Everything is there. But please, go quickly. They'll try to erase it." The video ended with a tearful apology. Margaret wiped her face and picked up the phone. She called her sister, Diane, and told her everything. Diane, always the pragmatist, helped her find a private pilot willing to take her into the mountains on short notice. It was Friday afternoon. According to a letter from David's lawyer, a company called Evergreen Environmental had been granted permission to begin restoration work on the property starting Monday. In other words, demolition. Margaret knew she had to get there before it was too late. Early the next morning, she flew out of Centennial Airport in Denver. They landed at a small rural airstrip in Clear Creek County. Waiting by the helicopter was Sarah, the pilot, a woman in her 40s with sun-worn skin, sharp eyes, and a quiet strength. "You Margaret Hartwell?" she asked. "Yes. Did you know David?" "Not personally, but my daughter did. She was a journalist. She mentioned his name a few times. She died 2 years ago in a car crash, but the brakes were cut." Margaret's breath caught in her throat. Sarah explained that her daughter had been investigating illegal dumping and environmental cover-ups. She believed David might have been helping whistleblowers, people at risk, a quiet ally, a hidden protector. As the helicopter flew over vast pine forests and snow-tipped ridges, the terrain below grew harsher. The trees thinned. The earth turned gray, and there, nestled in the valley, was a single concrete structure still standing, partially embedded into the side of the mountain. "Oh my God," Margaret whispered. "That's not erosion or fire damage," Sarah said. "That's surgical demolition." They landed near the entrance. The area was eerily silent. No wind, no birds, no signs of wildlife. Just stillness. Margaret stepped out holding the envelope the attorney had given her. Inside was a daily code, changed for security. A steel door stood before them with an electronic panel. Her fingers trembled as she entered the code. The door hissed open. A faint light flickered from inside. They stepped into a long hallway, pristine and cold, the walls lined with architectural sketches. David's signature was on all of them. "This wasn't a cabin," Margaret said. "It's a facility." She walked slowly, absorbing every detail. The place had power. It was operational. Someone had been maintaining it. At the end of the corridor, a final door loomed. Margaret stopped, took a deep breath, and opened it. She wasn't ready for what she'd find next. The room at the end of the hallway was a circular command center. A large U-shaped desk wrapped around a cluster of monitors. All were dark, except one. On that screen, a message blinked softly. "Identity confirmed, Margaret Hartwell, access granted." Below it, "Play final message." Margaret looked at Sarah. Without a word, she pressed the button. David's face appeared. His eyes were heavy, voice strained, but steady. "If you're watching this, it means I'm gone. I'm sorry, Margaret. I never wanted you involved in this, but you need to know what I've done." He leaned in closer. "Back in the late 90s, I was part of a design team building industrial facilities in rural Illinois. I met a man named Robert Hastings. He worked maintenance at one of the plants and found records showing his company, Evergreen, was dumping chemical waste into the water supply. Robert and his wife, Elaine, came to me. They had proof, photos, reports, fear in their eyes." David paused. "I tried to help them, hid the evidence, made calls to reporters, but 3 days later, their house burned to the ground. Robert, Elaine, and their youngest daughter died. Only their teenage son, Jason, survived. He'd been staying with a cousin." David looked away for a moment, then back. "That night changed everything. I realized the system wouldn't protect people like them, so I built something that could. That something was the hidden compound." David had used shell companies to purchase remote land across the U.S., starting with this valley. Over the next decade, he designed and constructed a secure underground facility. It had food storage, water filtration, power, medical supplies, and communications. It was a sanctuary for whistleblowers, activists, and survivors who had nowhere else to go. Each month, when I told you I was handling old business, I came here to check on them, to protect them. It was never about the land, Margaret. It was about saving lives." Sarah sat beside Margaret, stunned. David's voice continued. "There's a file cabinet to your left. Everything is in there. The people we helped, the crimes they exposed, the proof. And now that I'm gone, they need you to finish what I started." The screen faded to black. For a long moment, Margaret didn't speak. Then she stood and opened the cabinet. Inside were files, neatly labeled folders, photographs, signed affidavits, names, dates, maps, stories. So many stories. Sarah wandered into an adjoining hallway. She called out, "Margaret, you need to see this." It was a large room, part common area, part memorial. One wall held photos of smiling families, children reading, women gardening, elderly couples laughing. People who had lived here, hidden but alive. The opposite wall was lined with formal portraits, 34 black and white photos, each with a name and date. Above them, a title, Founders of the Sanctuary Network. David Hartwell was the last photo. The glass covering it was still smudged, recently placed. Footsteps echoed behind them. "He said you'd come." They turned. An elderly man stood in the doorway, tall and calm, with a clipboard in hand. "My name's Henry. I've been here since the beginning. David rescued me after I exposed corruption in New Jersey's infrastructure projects. They tried to ruin my life. He saved it." Henry explained that David had helped build 12 sanctuaries across the country, hidden shelters connected by encrypted systems. Over the last 2 years, 11 of the 12 co-founders had died, most from natural causes. Several had pacemakers. The timing was suspicious. David believed they were being taken out, quietly, silently. He knew he was next. He led them to a room labeled final archive. Inside were hard drives, printed documents, and surveillance records. Evidence connecting Evergreen and other companies to illegal dumping, bribery, and at least 4 mysterious deaths. Margaret flipped through one folder, stunned. "This is enough to take down the whole board of directors." Henry nodded grimly. "But releasing it is dangerous. The people behind this, they don't mess around." Just then, a nearby terminal blinked. Henry tapped a key. "A secure connection just came online. The Survivor Network. They're asking for you." The monitors came alive. Faces of men and women, some masked, others in shadow. Whistleblowers, all of them, connected from unknown locations. A woman named Rachel spoke first. "David always said that one day, if anything happened to him, you'd be the one to carry it on." Margaret stepped forward, unsure of her voice. "I don't know how to do this. I'm not a hero. I loved him." Rachel smiled gently. "He was our protector. Now you're our hope." The others nodded silently. On one screen, a young man appeared, Jason Hastings, the boy who survived the fire, now a grown man. "David saved my life. He gave me a second chance. Whatever you decide, we'll follow your lead." Sarah whispered to Margaret, "We're in this now. All of us." Margaret looked at the files, the faces, the years of secrets waiting to surface. Just then, an alarm buzzed. Henry ran to the terminal. "Vehicle approaching." A black SUV rolled to a stop at the compound's edge. A tall woman stepped out, elegant, cold, confident. Margaret recognized her face from the files. "Elizabeth Cole," said Henry, CEO of Evergreen. She stared directly into the security camera. "Mrs. Hartwell," she said calmly, "I came to talk, just you and me." Margaret stood frozen, watching Elizabeth Cole on the monitor. The CEO of Evergreen was immaculate, tailored ivory suit, slick bun, dark sunglasses. She stood in front of the compound's entrance as if she owned the place. "She's not here to talk," Sarah muttered. "She's here to assess the threat." "I know," Margaret replied, "but I'm going to meet her anyway." "You're not going alone," said Henry, already pulling a small device from the drawer. "This will record everything, no matter what happens." Minutes later, Elizabeth was led inside and escorted to the same circular command room. She removed her glasses and calmly took a seat across from Margaret. "Mrs. Hartwell," she began smoothly, "I want to start by expressing my condolences. Your husband was complicated, talented, but misguided." Margaret said nothing. Elizabeth placed a slim folder on the table and slid it toward her. "We're prepared to offer a settlement. $100 million in a memorial fund named after David. You'll lead it. Full public honors. You control the narrative." "In exchange for what?" Margaret asked coldly. "The documents, the drives, all of it. We make this go away, quietly, respectfully. No drama, no more blood." Sarah took a step forward. "My daughter died trying to expose what you people are hiding. You want quiet? You've had quiet for 20 years. Elizabeth remained calm. "If this goes public, it'll cause panic. Stock crashes, bankruptcies, layoffs. People will get hurt." Margaret tapped her phone screen. The display showed a countdown timer, 00.01 on 17. In exactly 77 seconds, encrypted packages will be delivered to 43 newsrooms across the country. Journalists, lawmakers, regulators, all the proof. "This is not a negotiation, Ms. Cole. It's a courtesy." For the first time, Elizabeth's expression faltered. "You don't understand what you're stepping into." Margaret's eyes didn't waver. "No, you don't." The seconds ticked down. Elizabeth's phone buzzed. She excused herself and walked into the hallway. When she returned, her face was pale. "The White House has been briefed. We've got a dozen subpoenas pending. My investors are pulling out. What did you do?" "I honored my husband's legacy," Margaret said simply, "and I told the truth." Elizabeth picked up the folder, her fingers tight around its edges. "This isn't over." "No," said Henry, stepping beside Margaret. "It's just beginning." By evening, the leaks had hit every major outlet: CNN, the New York Times, even international press. The Evergreen Files, as they were quickly dubbed, exposed decades of environmental crimes, fraudulent permits, bribed inspectors, and connections to suspicious deaths of whistleblowers and activists. Jason Hastings went on national television. Calm, composed, he shared his story of survival. The night his parents died, the silence that followed, and the man who had given him a second chance. David Hartwell didn't just save me. He created a safe haven for people like my parents, people the world tried to erase. Clips of the sanctuary circulated online, photos of the underground facility, the memorial wall, the children's reading room. Anonymous former residents began sharing their testimonies. One, a nurse, said, "They saved my life. If not for this place, I'd be in a ditch." Lucia Alvarez's story, Sarah's daughter, was aired on 60 Minutes. Her last audio recordings revealed she had been closing in on Evergreen's hidden waste sites. Her death, long ruled an accident, was now under federal investigation. The public response was immediate and furious. Protests erupted in major cities. A congressional hearing was scheduled within days. Investigations were reopened, executives arrested, assets frozen. And the sanctuaries? They emerged from the shadows. Margaret, backed by Jason and Henry, helped transform them into public institutions. They called it the Hartwell Foundation, in David's honor. Their mission, to protect truth-tellers and preserve safe spaces for those who speak out. The original compound in Colorado became a national museum of truth and protection. The memorial wall grew as new names were added, those who risked everything for justice. Sarah stayed on, leading reforestation efforts in the valley. What had once been concrete slabs now blossomed with native trees and flowers. Every plant, every bloom, a quiet victory. Jason turned his trauma into action, creating legal defense programs for whistleblowers. In just 1 year, over 200 people came forward with their stories. Margaret rarely gave interviews. She declined awards and avoided cameras. But on the 1-year anniversary of David's death, she stood before a crowd in the sanctuary garden. "I was married to a quiet man. I thought I knew everything about him. I didn't. But what I learned after he died changed me. And it gave me something I didn't expect, a purpose." Behind her, children played under the trees. Survivors held hands. The air smelled of pine and promise. Henry approached quietly and said, "David always believed the truth could live, even in the dark." Margaret smiled softly. "And now, it's finally in the light." The media storm lasted for weeks. The Hartwell files were everywhere. Talk shows, headlines, editorials. News anchors used words like cover-up, conspiracy, and national reckoning. The truth, once buried deep in a hidden Colorado valley, was now unavoidable. Congress opened formal hearings. Executives at Evergreen were subpoenaed. Elizabeth Cole was arrested at a private airport in Arizona, attempting to flee the country. Video of her in handcuffs went viral within hours. The Justice Department launched a full investigation into corporate sabotage, environmental crimes, and targeted killings of whistleblowers. Several former insiders turned state's witnesses, confirming what David had documented all along. Margaret, however, stayed away from the chaos. She wasn't interested in attention. Her focus was on restoring the sanctuaries and the lives within them. With Jason Hastings and Sarah by her side, the Hartwell Foundation was officially launched. Donations poured in from across the country, small contributions from teachers, nurses, retirees, people who believed in truth, in protection, in David's legacy. The original facility, now called the Hartwell Center for Justice, was transformed. The underground compound became a public space. Its hallways no longer felt cold or secretive. They were lined with exhibits honoring whistleblowers from all over the country, from healthcare workers to military veterans to journalists who refused to stay silent. Outside, the once barren land bloomed. Sarah oversaw reforestation projects. Native grasses returned. Trees cast long shadows across the valley. Where concrete slabs once lay, there were now gardens, benches, and a memorial grove. Each tree bore a name, some known, others anonymous. Jason developed a legal network that spanned all 50 states. He trained lawyers, built safe reporting systems, and offered free protection to those coming forward with the truth. Within a year, over 300 new whistleblowers had reached out. The tide was turning. And Margaret? She found peace, not in justice, but in purpose. Each morning, she walked the perimeter of the valley, not for safety, but for reflection. Sometimes, she'd stop beneath the wind turbines David had installed years ago, long before anyone else thought of renewable energy. She'd smile. He was always ahead of his time, she'd say. One afternoon, a group of schoolchildren visited the center. They listened to the story of David Hartwell, of courage, of quiet resistance. A little girl raised her hand and asked Margaret, "Wasn't it scary, doing something so big?" Margaret paused. Then she knelt beside the girl and said, "Yes, but sometimes the right thing is also the hardest, and you don't have to be fearless. You just have to do it anyway." Later that day, Margaret stood at the center's garden. A stone plaque bore David's name. Below it, an inscription. "The truth doesn't die in silence. It waits for someone brave enough to speak." Henry, now retired, joined her. They watched as volunteers planted new flowers near the grove. "You think we did enough?" he asked. Margaret took a breath, looking out across the valley, once a graveyard of secrets, now a cradle of truth. "I think we started something that can't be stopped." A light breeze moved through the trees. In the distance, children laughed, the sound of life returning.